Yes. Okay. Joining us for more on this discussion, on this issue, is a special advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Ajuri Ngelale. Thank you for staying with us, Ajuri.
Gentlemen, good afternoon, and good afternoon to all of our viewers.
Good to see you. Good to see you again. I want to say congratulations, your new appointment, special advisor to the President.
Official spokesman.
Thank you very much.
So we are here again. We're talking compressed natural gas fired vehicle engines and electric vehicles. The President has shown a desire to move in this direction. Help us to understand what the President is thinking, what is propelling this desire of the President.
Yes, of course, His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is renowned, not just around this country, but around the continent as a visionary. He is someone who sees things happen before they happen. I recall in the early 2000s when he rolled out the plans for intra-city railway for Lagos. Many people thought it was impossible, and today, of course, everyone has now seen that come into manifestation. This is no different. We are going to see in short order an unprecedented scale of investment, not just in electric vehicle production and distribution, but also in CNG fueled vehicles, both in production as well as ensuring that you've dealt with the supply side and the demand side. What do I mean by that? Mr. President, seeing, obviously, understanding the pain that Nigerians are facing and feeling throughout all parts of this country as a result of the removal of the fuel subsidy, with the fuel price at an average currently of about 617 naira per liter, and knowing that CNG runs at approximately anywhere between 139 to 170 naira per liter, it's really a no-brainer to move aggressively into ensuring that we are able to adopt CNG fueled vehicles across, particularly our commercial vehicle and transportation companies across especially the urban centers of our country, at least in the first phase. How this is going to work is that already we've partnered with an indigenous company, NIPCO, which may be familiar to many Nigerians. They already have 14 CNG filling stations across the country, really the only company to have CNG filling stations at that scale. Clearly, there's need to massively scale that up so that we can get those stations established across the country. But within the parameters of the agreement, which has been struck very recently under this administration between the NNPCL and NIPCO, there's essentially a two-phase program which will lead to the development and establishment of 56 new CNG filling stations nationwide across all states of the Federation. That does not include the co-location of CNG filling facilities at existing NNPC filling stations. These are only NIPCO filling stations that I'm referring to, 56. In phase one, which runs, again, this is time-based because Mr. President understands the urgency required to deal with resolving or alleviating the pains being felt by Nigerians. In the first phase that runs from between now and approximately March 31st, 2024, that's about 9 months, essentially. What we're going to be doing is rolling out 21 CNG filling stations across the country, across all geopolitical zones. And then phase two will run from April 1, 2024 to March 31st, 2025, essentially 1 year later, for the remaining 35 CNG filling stations under our agreement with NIPCO, which brings it to 56. This is going to enable us to service approximately 200,000 customers daily through these 56 CNG filling stations. But in addition to that, These filling stations are going to be run not just on gas pipelines, because you have multiple types of filling stations, and I want to be clear about how this works. You have what we call the online stations. These are stations that are linked directly to the gas feeding pipeline, right? But many of the areas across this country are not yet linked by pipeline. So what you also have within the parameters of this agreement, and there are other agreements which I'll soon cite, but within this agreement, you also have what we call the mother stations. Mother stations are essentially stations that would allow you to fuel what we call mobile cascade units. These are the trucks that will be going to other filling stations to fill the production requirements of those filling stations that are not on the gas pipeline. So, for example, if you have a place like maybe Jigawa or somewhere like that, or even closer, a place like Niger, for example, we would now be able to get to them using these mobile cascade units, which are essentially these mega trucks that will transport the CNG from the mother stations, which will be filling these cascade units, to those stations that are offline, known as daughter booster stations. So you have the mother stations, which is the hub. Then you have the daughter stations, which are offline, that will be fed by the cascade units moving to them from the mother stations. That's how that's going to work. Now, in addition to that, we have now said, look, you cannot just look at putting together CNG filling stations under one company. Yes, that's an important part of this. But we also know that for those stations that cannot be fed online on a gas pipeline in far-flung parts of the country, particularly in the north, we know that, of course, we're going to be heavily relying on what we call virtual pipelines. Virtual pipelines being, truck distribution networks. So what we have in store is there's a company, for example, known as Greenville and LNG that already has an articulated virtual pipeline network, a network of trucking distribution lines that they've used for PMS filling stations for a long time, and LNG, that we will now be able to leverage on for the transportation of CNG products. It's important to note that with CNG, unlike some of the other fuels, if it's outside of a 250-kilometer radius, that transportation of the CNG product becomes non-viable because of the nature of CNG. So it's important that whatever you're doing is within a 250-kilometer radius, which is why it now becomes very strategic to have the mother stations, which can now feed those stations that will be offline on a sustainable basis. Then, in addition to all of that, the president has said, look, he's a financial architect and a financial engineer. He's a planner and then an executor. So what he's now said is, look, we're dealing with the short-term pains through the arrangements that I've just cited and through some other arrangements. But we also have to look at the medium to long term to ensure that Nigerians living in every part of the country can have access to CNG, not just filling stations, but the kits that will actually enable you to move your car from being PMS dependent to now CNG compliant. So how this is going to work, in addition to the filling stations I mentioned, 56, within the first two phases of the program, ending by April 1st, 2025, which is essentially midterm of this administration. What we're also going to be doing is we're going to put in place over 30, essentially 36 factory-kitted equipment workshops, where any Nigerian bringing their car, their truck, their motorcycle, even keke napep, can come and have these conversion kits applied to their vehicles so that they can now move from PMS, which is obviously much more expensive, almost 4 times as expensive, to CNG, saving their costs over time. In addition to all of that, there's also going to be the...
Listen to me. That's the point that a lot of Nigerians really need some clarity about. How much is it going to cost them to have this conversion take place. But people are saying, oh, it's expensive for this conversion to take place, this and that. Many Nigerians are already worried, but they don't want to spend so much money. Yes. Is government going to build these service centers and have the conversion to CNG-fired engines subsidized to the point that the average Nigerian can afford it?
And how long will it take? Yes, because people don't want to just put their vehicles down for weeks.
Very important question and a pragmatic one. So this is why I was saying that the president is a very meticulous planner and executor of policy, because he's already envisaged that. And so part of the policy involves a very important collaboration between the federal administration and the state governments. The reason why this plays into what you have just asked is, if we're talking about how much a conversion kit, for example, a CNG conversion kit will cost, you're dealing with now the factors that lead to the determination of that final cost burden that the end user, the Nigerian citizen, is going to be faced at the end, how much he or she will be purchasing it at. What are those factors? So, for example, if we're, let's just say at the forefront of the policy, at the beginning, at least at the beginning, because of the urgency involved in the situation, we say that at the outset, we will have a gradual process of moving from full import of the fully finished, conversion kits from abroad. If that is the case, what we can do and what we are going to do as part of the policy is ensure that we put in place zero customs duty on all CNG conversion kits, meaning that if the supplier is no longer having to pay hefty customs duties on the import of these conversion kits, obviously that dramatically reduces the end user's cost implication when he's ready to buy the kit. That's one. Secondly, we've collaborated with the state governments to say, look, not only will we desire or require from you to put in place a single window, clearance center, effectively where all certifications, all compliances required, compliance certifications required by the state government regulatory authorities, where you can now say, look, you go to that one-stop shop. They will give you all the clearances you require to be able to establish your CNG conversion kit fitting factory, as well as a one-stop shop where you also get the certifications and compliance documents, so that you can set up your CNG filling station. So we've looked at all sides of this, and we've said whatever is going to reduce not just financial costs, but also time costs. This is what we're now working with the state governments to do. Before now, you would have a situation where federal government from the center comes out with a very fantastic policy. It sounds great on paper. But because they have not effectively elucidated those things that need to be done with the states to make it actionable, to make it efficient, there's all sorts of time delays and financial implications and duplications and all of these kinds of things. Now, with this policy, we have worked hand in glove with the state governments to ensure that we reduce the time cost. We also ensure that the state governments have signed on to agree to the swift allocation to the most accessible land plots within their various urban centers, where they will give these plots to CNG filling station developers and establishment authorities, so that they have quick access to land, they have quick clearance through the compliance process with the
last broadcast,
regulatory authorities.
Ajuri, during his last broadcast, the president spoke about buying 3,000 CNG fueled vehicles. When would they come in?
Please,
the president promised Nigerians 3,000 vehicles, CNG fuel powered vehicles. When will they come in?
Thank you very much. So yes, in his remarks, he referred to 100 billion naira that will be spent on the procurement of 3,000 20-seater CNG fueled buses. So we are currently in full-scale negotiations with not just indigenous manufacturers, but also those who can ensure that we get these buses on the ground as quickly as possible. The president, in his remarks, gave a timeline for the distribution of palliatives of approximately 9 months between now, effectively, and the end of March 2024. Of course, there are going, when you're talking about manufacturing of CNG fueled buses, this is going to probably take longer than, for example, releasing 200,000 metric tons of grains from the strategic grain reserves, for example. So it's probably going to go beyond the first quarter of 2024. We're going to be looking at releasing them in phases of hundreds of CNG fueled buses. But in addition to that, providing single-digit interest rate loan facilities to transportation companies across all the urban centers across all states of the Federation, so that not only are they taking custody of the buses, which will divide by 4, essentially, the transportation cost of PMS fueled buses as against the CNG fueled buses for the average Nigerian citizen using those commercial transportation systems. But what we're also saying is that on the flip side of this, we have to be actively looking at EVs. You alluded to that quite a bit in your intro. Right now, the National Automotive Development and Design Company, NADDC, has already been able to establish 18 EV skills workshops and training workshops across the country, where they've already begun the process of transferring skills to local mechanics and local artisans who are going to be involved in the process of ensuring that we have a sustainable structure of EV mechanical maintenance centers across the country. In addition to that, the NADDC has put in place about 3 different areas where we have solar-powered electric vehicle charging stations in Enugu, in Lagos, and in Sokoto. That has to be massively and swiftly upgraded across the country. We believe we can do that over the course of the next 18 to 24 months. But the most important part of this is accessibility, finance, right? Which is why the federal government, under its new automotive development policy, has put in place a 10-year tax relief on all electric vehicle developers across the country, in addition to a 5-year tax holiday for all companies that want to develop either PMS or CNG fueled automobiles across this country. So whether you're looking at the issue of demand, which has to do with making sure you have these centers where you can convert all of these vehicles. We want to do 1 million vehicle conversions to CNG over the course of the next 5 years. That's going to be done in a process of phases. And the first phase is what I laid out in our agreement with NIPCO, which the president is very, very excited about.
So let's talk about electric cars, electric vehicles once again. What does the government plan to do to ensure that indigenous Nigerian companies go into manufacturing, not just assembling vehicles? Because you look at, China was able to sell 1.2 million electric vehicles in 1 year. This looks like the future where we can really make a lot of money. At least we can get patronage from the West Coast if we move into that area. What is government doing to ensure that it galvanizes indigenous companies to get involved in electric car manufacturing?
And this is really where, Babajide, where the National Automotive Design and Development Council, I think, has been quite proactive in recent months, where they've been able to galvanize actors like one of the ones you mentioned, which is Jet EV. But you also have Hyundai Kona Electric Motor Company. Innocent is gradually trying to get involved in that field as well, and others. We want to ensure that we have as many hands at the table as possible to really create a competitive marketplace, which obviously would eventually bring costs down through the competition. But I think it's obvious that we have, we are very much beneficiaries of being a country that's sited on the equator. We have plenty of sunlight, and we need to leverage that, which is why the future of the Nigerian transportation system is really going to involve having these solar-powered, as against electricity-powered, solar-powered recharge stations across our federal expressways, where we know that vehicles and solar-powered electric buses, for example, are able to move to the tune of approximately 250 to 300 kilometers before they need to recharge. If we can have that kind of availability of these solar-powered recharge stations across our federal expressways, not necessarily just built by government, but of course built by private sector partners, just the way you see Tesla doing it across Western countries. We can do that locally, and we can do it quite cheaply, obviously with the availability of solar power. So this is going to be the way of the future. But then you also have to be pragmatic about the fact of what is on ground today, and the fact that we have so much domestic gas resource that has been underutilized, that we have just been flaring and wasting and even destroying our environment with, when we could have been turning that into US dollars and foreign exchange earnings. So our focus now is to be sure that we deal, yes, with EVs simultaneously as we deal with the issue of maximizing the utilization of our domestic gas resources, so that we develop our local market to the point where we can actually have the competitive regional advantage to be able to be exporting CNG fueled and electronic and EVs that are produced in Nigeria to our neighbors, who are also going to be using Nigerian produced CNG. So we get the benefit of them buying the front end and also them buying the back end, all at the benefit of the Nigerian economy. The president is determined to ensure that Nigeria's economy gets full value for all aspects of the value chain, whether it is EV, whether it is CNG-fueled automobiles or mass transit systems. We want to make sure that we're not just simply importing. Yes, in the short run, because of the urgency of the situation, and we need to minimize the...
One final question for you before we go. Ajuri, one final question from you.
Yes. Okay, go ahead.
A lot of people are still thinking about now is the fact that some of these projections, they are long term. We are talking about 9 months, 24 months, and the rest. What happens in the interim? How close are we to getting what majority of Nigerians, not just government workers, will consider a relief in the transport sector? Because that is where the major issue is. As a car owner, you can't afford to enter into any petrol station now, no matter which part of the country you are, with less than 5,000 naira. So what's the shortcut? How do we move, at least in the interim, before all these long-term reliefs will come?
Well, I think in the context of what we're talking about, I don't think we would call 9 months long term. This is, I think, by any planning, projection, 0 to 9 months would constitute short term as part of a long term strategy. But what I would say is that we are not in the business, and I've said this to various audiences in recent days. We're not in the business of making false promises. We will only tell Nigerians what we know we can do. I think part of the reason why Nigerians have hold so much skepticism toward government is that they've been told that they will receive things that they don't end up receiving. So we want to stay on the path of truth. We want to tell people what we can do within the legitimate realities and financial constraints that we currently have, and to bring that amelioration of suffering in the country. But what I will say is this to your question. We have already put together the financial package for the transportation companies to access in immediate effect. This should, in turn, lead to a very quick, at least, reduction in the cost of transportation, at least in the mass transit systems across the country. That is something we can do immediately. The president has already put in place, signed 4 executive orders that have suspended taxes that would have already hit companies such as mass transit companies and many others across the country that will no longer be in effect as a result of the suspension caused by his executive order, which he signed, meaning that these transport companies and many others are having more expendable internal revenues that they can now use to create a buffer for users of those mass transit systems. That's in the immediate term, not in 9 months. So yes, we do the one we can do today, but we also are realistic with our people to say, look, there's no such thing as snapping your fingers and having buildings built in 24 hours. It doesn't happen like that anywhere. We tell people what we can do, but the one we say we can do and the timeline at which we say we will do it, we must abide by that, and we must fulfill that promise to Nigerians. And that is the commitment that we are making under the leadership and administration of His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
Okay, Ajuri will be on our current affairs show, Politics Tonight, on Wednesday by 8 p.m. So you can catch up with Ajuri for 1 full hour on Wednesday by 8 p.m. on Wednesday, just this Wednesday. I want to thank you for your time, Ajuri. Thank you for your intervention.
Thank you for having me. God bless all of you.
Amen. Jude?
Yes.
Done and dusted, and I wish that we just get